Good evening. I think after that excellent panel, I'm not left with much to say. Uh, I do have a PowerPoint to show, but I would like to begin with a more powerful point. As people were talking, I realized a child prevented me from making a big mistake early in my life. Close to 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, deep in the forest, living with tribals, we started a school. I started a school not to start a school. Somebody gifted us a cow. And to keep it safe from the wild animals, I built a cow shed. And we spent a princely amount of 5,000 rupees those days. And the medical college didn't teach me how to milk a cow. So I very nearly killed it. And therefore decided to give it back to the donor. But we had built a building. So we got to do something with it. To keep the building occupied, I thought, let's get the children inside. So that's how the school started. And I still remember, I was a teacher, I was a doctor, I was a cook, multiple things. And children would cook themselves. These were the first batch of 28 children. I still remember them, and they're still in touch with me. They're pretty old now. Every day they would come, some children would cook. We in Karnataka in the forest, we eat ragi. Today ragi is a big fancy food, but those days it was the rural man's food. And some would cook, some would make sambar. This child, his turn that day was to make the ragi into balls. So they would make the ball based on number of children, and of course me, so 28 children and me, so 29 ragi balls had to be made. Manju had come to school, and as he came to school, he brought his young little 3-year-old sister, Sunanda. Because his parents had gone to the village fair to sell their bamboo work, and so he had to take care of the child. He brought her along with him. And my first thought when I saw this extra child in school was, oh my God, one more mouth to feed for me. Because those were difficult times. I would go to my city of Mysore, literally beg with shopkeepers, collect some food material, come back to the forest, cook and feed the children. So my mind immediately processed as, oh my God, one more child to feed? But then, possibly some amount of dignity left in me then, made me wait, didn't do anything. And Manju was making these balls. So I was hoping he would make 30 balls, and nobody would have noticed. A little extra from everybody going to the 30th ball wouldn't have made a difference. Manju made exactly 29 balls. That upped my curiosity. And when the time came for the prayers and the children sat down to eat, he got his sister, made her sit beside his plate, broke his ball into two and gave half to her. I didn't understand what was happening, and after the lunch I called Manju aside and said, he was a 7-year-old, you should remember that. Why didn't you make 30 balls? And what Manju told me has taught me something deep. What Manju told me in his own sweet little tribal way, he said, that was my sister I brought. It was my responsibility to feed her. It is unfair for me to take from the others and then give it to her. Sharing, caring, compassion cannot be taught. Manju lived it. That is spirituality in action. That day I decided, if I do formalize this school, I'll remember what Mark Twain said. He said, don't let schooling interfere with education. I decided, like Vivekananda said, if the school can't bring out the inner power within you, it's better not to run a school at all. Spirituality, to me, my friends, is not something you teach. I heard all that was getting discussed here. Spirituality is what you also learn from the children who come to you in the first place. And most of us don't understand that. I think they come ready with God's deep imprint. But we are not ready with the antennas out there to even recognize them with the knowledge they have. Because we are hierarchically trained to say, we teach and they learn. I think Indian knowledge, learning was never hierarchical. It happened, it just happened. So I'm going to walk you through a presentation, put all these thoughts together quickly. I don't know if it's coming up okay. So essentially, how do you take this to the world? Because my job today is to first take India to Indians in the government. We're transforming India's bureaucracy and we're talking about institutionalization. It's been a hard battle, a great challenge. Mission Karma Yogi is doing exactly this. And in people who have never been trained, they're all like me. Thankfully, I had Manju to recalibrate my thinking and put me back online because the schooling had not done that for me. But I deal with a lot of people who even believe that all this is nonsense. So it's a big battle. 40 million civil servants and their attitudes to change is not easy. And if that happens, Bharat will be truly Bharat. So just let me go back into what I believe is, we talk of children, and then when we talk of a few days ago Delhi, and it's all very nice to talk, a child jumps out of the 19th floor. What gives the child the courage to jump out of the 19th floor but doesn't give the courage to live? I've had to figure that out. And that's the society we have created, and it's a nice newspaper headline to read, and then life goes on. We just move on. What matters is to understand what went wrong. I think it's time for us to focus. And that will give us a lot of answers. So I think the three crises, it's not just one crisis. Let's not even call it a spiritual crisis. The spirituality can't be broken out like these small pieces. But I'm going to compartmentalize for understanding because we understand frameworks better. So India was never about frameworks. It's all about that oneness. So the first crisis, I think, is whether we like it or not, the crisis of ecology itself. And we haven't learned. It's very nice to quote Vedic statements, the palas are tree, and before I put the summit into the yagna, I ask for forgiveness from the tree. Not because it's a fallen down twig that I'm allowed to pick. It's already fallen down anyway. But because India already knew that the twig which fell down also has a place in the diversity and in the cycle of life. That was put for some, maybe termites, whatever it was. And so we say, please forgive me for doing this. And I've seen enormous such wisdom in the tribals I lived with. I think they were inherently spiritual. So-called mainstream cultures have destroyed it. But then we go back and say, bring the tribals back into life. But what we have done is we have created a crisis of ecology, consuming so much. And again, why? Like Raghav said so wonderfully, we have forgotten the principles of the Purusharthas. And we just talk about it in isolation again. We can't really separate out the other three. You can't talk of a child today in 11th grade or 12th grade. The tribal school is now 40, 50 years old. We have several rural schools. The child and the parent wants to get into medicine. The child and the parent wants to get into engineering. You just can't go tell the child don't. But can you tell the child how to be a better engineer or a better doctor? And what is the grounding for that? I think that's more pragmatic. And that's a realistic option that we have. So what the crisis of inequities? That's enormous. 7 companies in the United States, between them, have a market capitalization larger than the entire GDP of Europe put together. It's just impossible to even figure this out. One man wants a salary of $1 trillion a year for just making cars and sending some rocket up into space, and we are all reading it like celebratory news. The more we read, the more things get celebrated. So that's the strange part of it. We all talk about celebration, but what do we read more and more? And somebody would say, oh, you should be like that guy, earn $1 trillion a year. And then we are setting standards without even recognizing that the standards that we are setting are not Bharatiya in the first place anyway. And then we want to Indianize it completely. The crisis of inequity is enormous. Like, let's look not so far, Saudi Arabia. Aramco's revenues contribute to 2.5 times the rest of Saudi Arabia's GDP. So we are really creating this world and crafting it and telling people how to make it more efficient. And that's what our business schools teach. So it's a big revolution that we need to think of. And the third crisis, a more important crisis that I think is the crisis of the self. And it's not a subject to be taught in schools. It's a subject to be lived throughout life. So you can't really say, this is what parents will do, this is what teachers will do, and this is what you will do the rest of the time. So I think we can talk of the modern trap, right? All of us know the modern trap. But then the real trap is not just modernism, because there's nothing like modernism. The real trap is consumption. Consumption has become our identity. Getting the next iPhone, getting the next laptop, getting the next something else, getting the extra sari. Come on. Who told you to buy saris for every festival? But you can call it culture. But that's because you only have 3 festivals every year to celebrate. More important festivals. But today you just go shopping like it's nobody's business. The mall attracts you so much. And then that's the identity we have created for ourselves. So what tells us that we should wear the same kurta for 10 years? I don't know. But then that's what modernism tells us. We got to live a particular way. And we create it, and then we want to go back to the Indic way. How many of us actually come into this conference and say, don't give me that bag? We have enough bags. Come on. Every conference they go, they give us a bag. Today they just make it jute bag. But it's still a bag. Somebody paid for it. You created it. So don't give anything. You want to hear me, just call me. If I want to come and be heard, I'll come. If I want to hear, I'll sit there. But why do we do all this and then again talk of Indianness? Bharatiyata was just, don't give to me. I meant it. It's not just talk. I still remember when we were children, we would pull the nib out from the reef, we'll try to push in from the other side, put the nib back and then try to make it right. Now, that is not poverty. It was culture. That was Indianness. So it is not that I couldn't have asked my father to get me one more refill. It was those days some 5 paise or 6 paise, but we could have got it done. But we don't do it because that's the way you lived. And that's the way it was. But why don't we celebrate that? But we celebrate modernism. And then, I think enough said about purpose. I'm not going to talk about it. But how do you teach purpose? Our challenge is about all this, the recent challenges in the US. I was teaching for a long time at Cornell, and we had a separate department of DEI. The university has to spend millions of dollars to tell the federal government that it is diverse enough. Come on, diversity is a way of life in the Indian thinking. You don't need a government to tell a reservation system and say this is how you do it. But that's for a different socio-economic paradigm, which is also not ours, it's also imported. And today we're talking about how do you really understand, purpose doesn't come as a single one-liner saying you give your life for others. I remember what Swami Vivekananda wrote, and in the letter to the Mysore Maharaja, I come from Mysuru, so it means a lot to me. He wrote a letter to the man who's paid for his travel to the United States. Look at the audacity of it. He goes there and writes back to him and says, "Oh, my prince, the vanities of life are transient, but he alone lives who lives for others. The rest are more dead than alive." I think what a school should do is to give this life to children. So he said what we need is life-giving education, not subjects that we teach. And how do you give life? You can give life in mathematics, you can give life in science, you got to discover how. That's what we are now trying to do with, it's very strange. If schools had done their job, because we lost the journey for 60 years, now we are trying to build, it's very difficult. It's something like building on a foundation which is not going to hold the building. And I keep worrying about it. The best you can do is possibly keep the scaffolding going till Vikasit Bharat, and then hope by that time the school should have grown enough to create the next generation of builders. But that's a reality. How do we really take care of it? So how do you create pressure? The real thing is we always want to create pressure. But how do you reverse the thing and say, can you create a purposive pressure? You're not going to stop creating pressure. We have had enough conferences. Come on, if all of us attending this conference had paid attention, we wouldn't have had this conference. That's the reality. Let's be harsh with ourselves. But we need to really ask, can we not reverse the paradigm, but redefine the paradigm and say, how do you create purposive pressure? On the parents, maybe, on the children, on the system. NEP was such a long time ago now. And we talk NEP. How many of us have actually read the entire document? Not that there's a Sartak document of 68 pages or 88 pages, the entire 400 pages. How many of us are really worried about what is being lost? The language crisis that Raghav said, it is not the language at the Bharatiya Bhasha level, the higher level, it is at the lower level. Because we stop thinking. I don't think in Kannada or Tamil, my mother tongue. I think in English and then convert and translate. I have a real problem when I came here 5 years ago. I didn't know Hindi, but I'm proud to learn Hindi. But my learning to Hindi was like, this CPU to that CPU, and then comes the words out. So my staff still make fun of me when I try to talk in Hindi, because I am always worried they'll misunderstand me. But then the understanding is not from the words. In India, the power of vak and the power of that inner force that came out when you spoke, if at all you had to speak, was so powerful, and that came because of your language and the way language communicated to us. So what do you call an achievement? You call Manju and celebrating. I was so happy to hear all this, because when I started this 40 years ago, people called me crazy. We would actually celebrate the child who plucked cotton during cotton season, saying the child is part of the family. The moment you say the child should be in school, otherwise it's child labor, you are condemning the child with a value which it never understands. If you say it's working for the family to make it survive for that particular year, you're changing the equation itself. And we compete with our communities. I want to give I think I have 3-4 minutes, I'll just quickly wrap up. In the 80s, I don't know how many of you are here who were watching television in the 80s, we only had black and white, and we were all given only Doordarshan. And even in South India, you had to watch Nukkad, whether you liked it or not. Whether you understood Nukkad or not, you had to watch it. Because that's all that was coming on television. They were not local languages then. And suddenly DD decided that it's boring, they themselves, and started DD Sports, also in black and white. And so for us, better than watching Nukkad in South India, we thought we'll tune DD Sports. I was traveling through Bangalore that day. I come from the forest. I switched it on. Luckily, I switched it on. And what I saw is what the spirituality we're talking about. And we destroy in schools. And that's the last point. Competition, which is devoid of the community. And I saw at the time at Hyderabad, specially challenged children's games were happening. 5-6 year olds. And they were about to start a race. 6 or 7 children in line. 2 in calipers, 2 with crutches, 2 on wheelchairs, different kinds of children. The race starts. The child in calipers was coming first. It was really going very fast, and maybe under 5 or 6 meters to complete. It was maybe 10 meter to 15 meter races for these children. And he slipped and fell and screamed in pain. And the child coming behind was also in calipers, coming with the child, just 1 or 2 meters behind this child. But he came up to the child and he didn't go ahead. He stopped running. He helped this fellow who was in the front to get up. The story doesn't stop there. And it was actually happening on Doordarshan. I don't know how many of them in the country were watching. I hope every school teacher was watching it. And he stopped, put his hands out like this. His legs were in calipers, but he put his hands out like this, stopped every other child from running, got them all to hold hands. And 8 children completed the race together. My friends, that is competition. 8 first prizes that will be given. That is spirituality in action. If you haven't understood it from your children, you never will. Don't try teaching them. It's never going to work. At least make sure you don't extinguish it already inside. Like Vivekananda said, education is the manifestation of the perfection already inherent in man. We have to really, really learn how to bring it out. The more you grapple with this question, the more you'll realize our entire model is Western. I studied in schools which are Western in their outlook. I went to Harvard, which is completely Western, as Western as you can get. Luckily, I discovered Bharat. I was just lucky. And today, it's a great opportunity to discover it deeper and deeper. It's an ocean. It's like drinking a ocean with a straw. You will have a lot of janmas. Thankfully, India gives a lot of janmas for that. So we can keep drinking as we grow along. I really believe, what can you give to the world? Swadhyay. So today we tell our officers, you start with Swadhyay. If you don't know why you are into public service, please quit. It's not about writing the UPSC exam, it's about understanding yourself. And that's the Gita in completeness. I don't have to explain anything more. No algorithm can give you. If you can't get this, you can't get that witness consciousness, if you can't teach the child to be mindful, to go to the balcony, watch how it's acting, recalibrate its actions, it can never survive. Again, remember, just you asking him to be good and have a purpose is not going to get him to survive in this real world. He has to survive too, and can you teach him that? And what Adi Shankara said is not just for Dridvashi Viveka. It's much deeper. How do you do it? How do you really create self-awareness? How do you create self-regulation? How do you create ecological consciousness? I have now discovered how important it is for relational intelligence. Because today there's a lot of literature coming out in public administration. State capacity is not capacity of the individual at all. And that is the beauty of Bharatiya Gyan. When we say it, they say it's not possible. But our own researchers today have discovered it is state's capacity to relate to its citizens. So Jan Bhagidari is not a slogan of the Prime Minister. Jan Bhagidari is a real relational capacity you can create with the citizen. And that relational intelligence is a trainable commodity. And if you can do it in schools, nothing like that. Quickly, next slide. Yeah. So what can you draw for me? It's not a religious instruction. You can't really instruct. Teach it as a science of human flourishing. And I think it changes the paradigm. Because children love the word science, parents love it more. For what reason, I don't know. You call STEM education, they'll come to your school. Don't call it spiritual. Why? It doesn't matter what you call it, in a sense, if you can do it. So can we really, really teach how to cultivate that outer noise and distinguish the inner noise, the chatter? I hear people talk about the chatter they suffer. We are all chattering all the time. How many of us are taught to actually understand silence? I don't know how many of you can live with your own silence, but try it. It's nice to say be silent, but the inner chattering keeps happening. How do you really understand dharmic economics? So without dharmic consumption, artha, kama, moksha is all nice to hear, but artha is going to be the driver. Let's accept it. Today's world is consumerism, but dharmic artha changes the equation completely. So when the Prime Minister said at G20, peace, planet, prosperity, and he said people, this is what he meant. Because the dharma part of it should drive everything else. And then for me, we have to restore the community bonding. Because I lived at tribals where only communities mattered. I think I've seen what community bonding can do. I grew up with community bonding in Bangalore, despite what Bangalore is today. We celebrate and say, we are like the West now. You have to call and go to your friend's house. That is not bonding. The ability to simply jump into your friend's house and say, come on, give me a cup of coffee. That is also the real community strength that we had those days. The next slide, I think we're done. So what foundation to look like? I just put a list. Don't call it ancient. They're eternal. I wrote ancient only because I hope will communicate this difference. And in the modern world, this is what it ends up building. And all of it is trainable in school, in every class. You don't need a separate class. I, as a child which went to a Christian school, we would have moral science class, and we would joke, that class you have to be moral. And you have to pass it also. No? So you have to only know enough of the morals to write in a paper, and then you're done. So we can actually do this and create it in your schools. Ecological diversity is not just planting trees. It is worrying about the fallen twig and leaving it there. Because some termite will make a full stomach out of it. How do you kill? How it's about also not killing that cockroach which comes into your house. It's very difficult, I know. Or the mosquitoes is biting you and we do it like this immediately. But these are part of life. How do you really, really understand this? You are the bridge. And we can keep talking. Don't treat them as vessels to be filled. This nice proverb, no? You keep pouring into the vessel. I think they're fires to light. And imagine the flame that you will create for the nation. And we started to value what can be measured. Because you can't measure acquisition of purpose. You don't measure it at all. You can measure 100% in maths. So we are all valuing what can be measured. It's time for teachers to figure out that you should measure what is truly to be valued. And if that paradigm is not got into the game, it's very, very difficult. We have in our school tried. How does leadership look like for a child? How does community engagement look like? How does making fun look like? How many children actually make fun of their teachers? What kind of names they give them? Try celebrating that. You'll get to know how you're called also. It's fun the way they do it. So, and we can't outsource crisis to technology. For mindfulness, an app. For meditation, an app. So I think somewhere even for relationships, an app, Facebook. Let's get out of this conundrum and say we live as people and don't see knowledge, Indian knowledge systems as the past, because a country which hasn't learned from its past will never build the future. For me, Vishwaguru is not simply what you keep saying, right? It's not about sending an engineer saying that 7 top IT companies are headed by Indians. What nonsense. What difference does it make? That fellow's already got an American passport. It makes no difference to me anyway. Passport itself makes no difference. But at the end of the day, can we really claim the glory? Can we really say that Vishwagurus were not children, lead the world with the life that we are all talking about, the being and the doing? So Vivekananda said it so beautifully. You can't separate being and doing. He said be and make. Hopefully all of you will do that.